Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Calm down, said Sirius, attempting to reassure Jasper. Don't act impulsively. If Calvin dares to harm her, I'll make sure he dies a painful death. Jasper clenched his fists tightly. Jasper got out of the car, and 3 other cars screeched to a halt next to him. Jared quickly stepped out of his car and shouted at Calvin, "Release my sister." "Oh. Everyone's here." Calvin suddenly pulled out a gun and pointed it at Willow's forehead before addressing the row of people in front of him. "Stay where you are, or I'll kill her right now." Willow looked at the people who had come to rescue her, her eyes instantly welling up with tears. She never expected the maid, who had taken care of her for 20 years, would kidnap her in such a manner. "Just leave, Jared. Don't bother saving me," Willow shouted at them. Even with a gun pointed at her head, she felt no fear. She was even more worried about the people standing in front of her. Her loved ones were all present, after all. "Willie!" Jasper exclaimed involuntarily. His eyes were filled with pain and anxiety. "Everyone except Jasper will have to back off to the main road over there, or I won't even give you a chance to negotiate," Calvin shouted while pointing at Jared. "Especially you, Mr. Presgrave. If you don't want to die with your sister, leave." "Let my sister go, and you can name your conditions," Jared said in a deep voice. How could he leave right now? "I have a personal grudge with Jasper." "You don't need to get involved." Scram! After he finished speaking, Calvin suddenly fired a shot into the air. The gunshot startled Willow, and she let out a sharp scream while covering her ears with one hand. "Willie! Willow!" Both men called out in concern at the same time. However, Calvin bellowed, "I won't say it again. I'll count to 10, and if all of you don't disappear, you won't get a chance to negotiate." Jasper turned to look at Jared while gritting his teeth and said, "No matter what the cost, I will save Willie." "I can't let you take the risk alone," Jared said. If they left, Jasper would be tortured to death by Calvin. "Trust me on this," Jasper said to Jared. 10, 9, 8. Calvin had already started counting. Jared didn't dare provoke this killer. At this point, he could only trust Jasper. He waved his hand, and his subordinates all returned to their cars, Sirius included. They then turned the car around and left. Calvin suddenly grabbed Willow by the throat and said to Jasper, "Jasper, your woman is really beautiful." Jasper clenched his fists as he watched Calvin choke Willow roughly, almost breaking his skin. "Let her go, you loser." "Face me if you have the guts," Jasper said angrily. He was trying to provoke Calvin. Needless to say, the man took the bait. He sneered and asked, "What did you say? Are you calling me a loser? Aren't you? In our last mission, I outperformed you with ease. This proves that I'm stronger than you." Calvin's face darkened. "Do you think you're worthy of competing with me?" Calvin had always been proud and arrogant, and he couldn't tolerate anyone being stronger than him, especially Jasper. Because of him, Calvin had been cast aside by their previous organization like trash. He harbored deep resentment and was determined to prove that he was undoubtedly stronger than Jasper. "I challenge you to a fight." "What kind of man uses a woman as leverage?" Jasper coldly snorted, his eyes filled with disdain. Calvin could have easily dealt with Jasper using his gun, but he wanted to prove himself. He wanted to prove that he was stronger than Jasper, even though he could see that Jasper was trying to provoke him. "I am the strongest one here, and I will make you understand how powerful I am," Calvin said. He then threw the gun into a nearby car and took out a small bomb before placing it on the car's hood. Then, he set a timer. "If you can't defeat me within 10 minutes, you'll watch your woman explode into pieces." Willow took a deep breath and looked at Jasper. She wondered, just 10 minutes? How can Jasper defeat this guy in such a short time? This guy is mad. I can tell he's on Jasper's level. But how can Jasper focus on a duel when I'm here, holding his attention? Don't worry about me, Jasper. Go. You don't have to do this for me, she pleaded with teary eyes. Jasper shook his head and said firmly, I'm not leaving. He took off his coat, revealing a gray shirt. His eyes locked onto Willow's with unwavering determination. At this, Calvin sneered and launched an attack. The two men clashed, every punch and kick carrying deadly force. Jasper was clearly distracted, and even though Willow remained silent, her presence weighed on his mind. Suddenly, Calvin kicked Jasper to the ground and struck his abdomen with his elbow. Ah! She cried out with tears streaming down her face and pleaded desperately, stop. Please, no more fighting. Desperate, she struggled against her handcuffs, causing her delicate skin to bear the brunt of her efforts. Yet, her focus remained firmly on Jasper. Blood trickled from the corner of Jasper's mouth after a blow to his abdomen. As Calvin moved in to strangle him, Jasper blocked with his hand and forcefully shoved him away before rising to his feet. With a contemptuous sneer, Calvin taunted, You're weak, Jasper. Do you think you can challenge me? Where did your confidence come from? Jasper stood his ground and wiped off the blood on his mouth. If you've got the guts, finish me off. Until then, you haven't won. Those words only stoked Calvin's anger and amplified his desire to end Jasper's life and savor his suffering. Come on, coward, get back on your feet and fight, he taunted, signaling for a final showdown. Stop. Please. Just stop, Willow pleaded desperately as she sensed Calvin's murderous intent. She could see how determined Calvin was to take Jasper's life, especially since Jasper had already coughed up blood from an earlier attack. Despite her pleas, no one paid any attention to her words. The countdown on the bomb strapped to her was down to 7 minutes. Jasper glanced at the timer and defiantly challenged Calvin. If you want my life, come and take it. Seeing Jasper in a weakened state, Calvin felt even more triumphant and decided to use his fists to send Jasper out of this world. In a relentless attack, Calvin aimed to send Jasper into oblivion with his fists. Jasper managed to block some of the blows but was pushed back. Calvin noticed Jasper's weakening strength, and the desire to kill him intensified. Calvin thought, once I kill Jasper and Willow, my mission will be considered a success. The client only cares that someone from the Presgrave family suffers greatly, not who dies. Meanwhile, Willow witnessed the brutal assault on Jasper as he was on the ground and spitting out blood. Her heart shattered, and in that moment, she cared not for her own fate, even if it meant being blown to pieces. She couldn't bear to see Jasper die for her. Jasper, go. Don't worry about me, she cried, tears clouding her vision and the wind tousling her long hair. Despair was etched across her face. After hearing that, Jasper looked at Willow. Just then, Calvin turned to look at her as well. He sneered, saying, Today, you'll watch your beloved woman die right before your eyes. I won't take your life just yet. I want you to witness how she shatters into pieces. With a twisted grin, he revealed a key hanging from his neck. This is the key to unlocking her handcuffs, but unfortunately, you don't have the strength to take it from me. Suddenly, he delivered a forceful kick to Jasper's chest. Jasper tried to block the attack, but Calvin grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to his knees. I want you to keep your eyes wide open and see how she dies. With just 3 minutes left on the countdown timer next to Willow, she looked at Jasper, mentally preparing for the inevitable. Her sole wish was to imprint his image in her memory before dying. She hoped that in her next life, she could spot him in a crowd, for if they couldn't be together in this lifetime, she was determined to reunite with him in the next. While Calvin had Jasper pinned down, it appeared Calvin had the upper hand. However, Jasper spotted an opportunity when Calvin let his guard down and quickly took action. With a quick move, Jasper elbowed the ground and wrapped his long legs around Calvin's neck. He sat firmly on Calvin, reaching for the key hanging around his neck, and yanked it. Calvin was instantly strangled by the chain, which turned into a deadly weapon, cutting off his breath and turning his face purple. He desperately swung his fists, trying to dislodge Jasper from his shoulders. However, Jasper's legs continued to tighten around Calvin's neck, dragging him closer to the edge of death. Calvin's face changed to a sickly shade of purple and red. Suddenly, blood spurted from Calvin's neck as the chain severed his windpipe. With a fierce expression, he fell to his knees. Only then did Jasper step away and remove the chain hanging from Calvin's neck. At this critical moment, there were just 15 seconds left on the countdown timer next to Willow. Willow had been engrossed in Jasper's counterattack, forgetting momentarily that she stood next to the Grim Reaper. However, when Jasper rushed to unlock her handcuffs, she realized the danger she was still in. Just then, she saw Calvin, who had fallen to the ground, suddenly rise again. Despite his broken neck, he was brimming with murderous intent as he charged toward Jasper. "Jasper, watch out," she shouted. Jasper quickly pushed Willow several feet away, concerned that Calvin might target her. Yet Calvin's aim was not her, he was going after Jasper. Summoning his last ounce of strength, Calvin pushed Jasper toward the cliff. At the same time, Jasper also realized Calvin's intentions. "Join me in death." Calvin spat out a mouthful of blood as his eyes burned with hatred. Jasper quickly turned, shoving the bomb into Calvin's grasp, intent on escaping. However, Calvin, in a deft move, latched onto Jasper, tripping him up with a well-placed ankle lock. Then, Calvin dragged Jasper down the cliff. "Jasper!" Willow cried out and rushed over. Just then, Jared arrived and hugged his sister tightly. "Willow, you can't go." "Jasper!" Sirius shouted as they had all seen the bomb in Calvin's hand earlier. "I'm sorry," Jasper whispered, his final words before plunging off the cliff. "Jasper! You can't die." Willow struggled to get to him, but Jared, aware of the bomb, held her back firmly. Boom! A deafening explosion echoed from the sea, sending water shooting 30 feet into the air, showcasing the bomb's devastating power. As Willow heard the explosion, her mind went blank, and a dark consciousness enveloped her. In despair, she collapsed on the ground. "Willow!" Jared shouted and picked up his sister. He looked at her pale, tear-stained face, his heart heavy and chest tight with pain. He turned to Sirius and said, "You handle things here. I'll take my sister back." "Go ahead, young Master Presgrave." "Leave this to me," Sirius replied, his heart heavy, knowing Jasper's chances of survival were slim. Afterward, Jared carried his sister away quickly. They got into the car and instructed their bodyguard to drive to the city hospital. Standing at the bottom of the cliff, Sirius removed his coat and jumped into the sea. At the same time, the bodyguard, Ricky, shouted, "Get in the water and start the rescue." Over a dozen bodyguards jumped into the sea, desperately searching for the missing person. Despite the uncertain fate, they were determined to locate Jasper. At that moment, Sasha and her family watched everything unfold from a distance. Then, she turned to her husband and son, saying, "You both need to leave this city immediately and never return." "What about you, Mom?" "I'm responsible for Miss Presgrave's beloved's death. It would be shameful to keep on living." She hadn't expected that the man Willow loved the most would be the one to die. Nonetheless, she was grateful that Willow survived, otherwise, her guilt would have been overwhelming. "Mom, what do you mean?" her son asked. "Come home with us, honey." Sasha shook her head and walked to the nearby rocks. After one last glance at her son and husband, she jumped into the sea. "Mom." Although a group of bodyguards searched for Jasper nearby, nobody noticed Sasha jumping into the sea. The rough waves made it nearly impossible to spot her, and since she had a determined intent to end her life, she didn't put up a fight and let herself sink beneath the ocean. However, her husband and son didn't dare to jump in to save her, as doing so from that height was almost certain death. Mom. Sasha's son wanted to jump several times, but was held back by his father. Don't go, son. You can't save her. Eventually, Sasha's lifeless body floated to the surface and was soon swallowed by the waves in the distance. Meanwhile, Sirius and his bodyguards had scattered to search for survivors after the explosion caused chaos in the turbulent sea. He spotted a figure in the distance and swam toward it, hoping it was Jasper. Unfortunately, it turned out to be Calvin. He was severely injured and lifeless in the water. Despair filled Sirius' heart, but he continued swimming, driven by the hope of finding Jasper alive. Finally, a bodyguard shouted, and Sirius swam in that direction, finding Jasper floating on the surface. With relief, Sirius quickly checked Jasper's breathing and said, "He's still breathing. We need to get him out fast." With a swift motion, the bodyguards above tossed down a handful of lifebuoys, allowing Sirius to pull an unconscious Jasper to the nearby beach. He performed CPR to expel the seawater from his chest. Jasper coughed up a few mouthfuls, his face pallid, but then a trickle of blood emerged from his ears. Sirius gently tapped Jasper's face and urged, "Jasper, wake up." Then, Sirius and the bodyguards hurriedly transported Jasper to the car as they sped toward the nearest hospital. However, the hospital was still half an hour away. Upon arrival, they rushed Jasper into the emergency room. Sirius stood by the emergency room door, reaching out to contact Antoine to provide an immediate update. "Is he still alive?" Antoine's voice trembled on the other end. "He's still alive for now." "What about his other injuries?" "No visible external injuries, but we're uncertain about internal damage. Jasper's receiving treatment at the hospital. I'll send someone to pick you up immediately. Also, my nephew must have no more contact with the Presgrave family. Bring him back." Sirius nodded, saying, "Understood." "What about Miss Presgrave? How is she?" "She fainted, minor cuts and bruises." "Okay. I'll communicate with the Presgrave family. Bring him back to me." Antoine gave the order. After ending the call, Sirius couldn't help but sigh, realizing that their profession allowed no room for love, as it would cost someone their life. He could only watch as this ill-fated couple drifted apart. Meanwhile, Jared was at the hospital and had just finished updating his parents. He told them about Willow's condition, and now Elliot and Anastasia were hurrying back from abroad. Jared's phone rang, and he saw an unfamiliar number. He answered hesitantly, "Hello? Mr. Presgrave, I'm Antoine Wyatt, Jasper's uncle and superior. There are important matters to discuss. I need your cooperation." Jared responded cautiously, "Go ahead, Mr. Wyatt. I'm listening." "Jasper and your sister have developed feelings for each other, but now he's been seriously injured on a mission. The extent of his injuries isn't clear, but I don't want him to have further contact with your sister." Jared felt guilty, knowing Jasper had paid a heavy price this time. He said, "I understand. I hope you also understand my concerns. Jasper's line of work isn't suitable for your sister. For their well-being, please tell her that he has sacrificed himself in this mission and ask her to sever her emotional ties with him." This. Jared hesitated briefly, aware of how significant Jasper was to Willow, perhaps even more than her own life. "Please cooperate. It's for your sister's best interests," Antoine urged. Jared's gaze shifted to his unconscious sister, and he struggled to imagine her reaction upon waking up. He wondered if Willow would faint again after hearing this news. Nonetheless, he couldn't disregard Antoine's words. Jared knew that Jasper's profession wasn't conducive to starting a family. Even if his sister married him eventually, their life would be fraught with constant fear and danger, not the future he wished for her. He reasoned that following Antoine's advice might be the right action. Hence, he needed to sever his sister's attachment to Jasper, allowing her to meet a remarkable man, rebuild her life, and enjoy stability. "I agree," he replied. "I'll do as you suggest." "Good. Keep this matter strictly confidential," Antoine advised. "I will. You have my word." After that, Jared couldn't resist asking, "If Jasper wakes up, could you provide me with an update on his condition? I want to know how he's doing." Antoine responded firmly, "I don't think that'll be necessary anymore, Mr. Presgrave. Thank you for your concern. Whether he lives or dies, it's now in fate's hands. Let's assume he's no longer with us." With those words, he hung up the phone. This was Jasper's worst performing mission in so many tasks. Antoine knew it was related to Willow because she had disrupted his actions and thoughts, preventing him from successfully completing the mission. From now on, he only needed an operative who could escape unharmed, not a nephew clouded by emotions. Meanwhile, a military helicopter landed in the hospital's grassy field. Jasper was wheeled out by a doctor, and 2 military medics rushed to assist, taking the medicine bottle from the doctor and lifting Jasper into the helicopter. Sirius observed the helicopter take off before leaving in his car. He needed to wrap up the remaining tasks and rejoin his team. He believed this mission was a success. Also, he expected the Presgrave family wouldn't remain passive, and the person responsible for their troubles would meet their end. After returning to the safe house, he organized his belongings and discreetly vanished from Averna. At the hospital, Jared sat by Willow's side, deeply worried as he looked at her pale face. He dreaded explaining everything to her because he knew it would cause her immense pain. Later that evening, he comforted Ellen over the phone outside the ward. She wanted to visit, but he convinced her to stay home and care for their son, advising against a visit for now. After hanging up, he re-entered the ward, noticing Willow starting to stir. He took a seat beside her and softly called, "Willow." "Willow?" Deep within her subconscious, Willow fought to rouse herself. At that moment, Jared's comforting voice was like a beacon, prompting her to open her eyes. Within moments of regaining consciousness, Willow urgently grasped Jared's hand and asked, "Where's Jasper? Take me to him." Her brother had issued strict orders to the bodyguards involved in the rescue, insisting on keeping it a secret. So, he could only respond with a regretful look, unsure of how to break the news to her. However, that one glance spoke volumes, shattering her heart before a word was uttered. "And no. It can't be. He won't leave me behind," she sobbed with her hands covering her face. The pain she felt was unlike anything she'd ever experienced, and she couldn't fathom Jasper's absence. Jared reached out his hand to try and comfort his sister. "Willow, he sacrificed himself for you. You must find the strength to carry on." Willow looked up with a pair of swollen red eyes. "What's the point of living without Jasper? I'd rather be in his place." Tears continued to pour down her face, dampening the sheets. Her pallor made it seem as though she might faint at any moment. Memories of their love story filled her mind. His eyes, voice, and kiss enveloped her like a warm embrace. The idea of a life without him was unbearable. She couldn't imagine moving forward. "Where is he? I need to see him," she said softly, fighting off the faintness creeping over her. She dreaded missing her chance to say a final goodbye. "Willow, he's been brought back by the special forces." "We won't be able to see him," Jared told her. "No. You must find a way for me to see him one last time. If you don't help, I'll ask Dad or Mr. Lloyd. I have to see him, no matter what," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Jared's heart ached as he watched Willow's anguish. The entire family had pampered her since she was young and had never faced such adversity. They had ensured she never had to endure hardship, but now she had to grapple with the pain of losing her loved one. "I can contact them, but I can't guarantee you'll get to see him," he tried to console her, knowing that raising her hopes would only deepen the disappointment. Jared knew Antoine had been adamant about severing Jasper's ties with Willow. Furthermore, as Jasper's only elder, even the Presgraves could not change Antoine's decision. "Really? Jared, I beg you. I want to see him for the last time," she said before bursting into tears. She couldn't accept a life without Jasper. Jared gently patted Willow, understanding that losing a loved one was an incredibly painful experience that no one could easily accept. Meanwhile, Jasper was on the operating table in a secret military hospital. He was surrounded by 5 or 6 doctors conducting various examinations. Standing outside the operation room, Antoine appeared to have aged significantly. His hair, typically tinged with a hint of gray from his demanding work, now appeared even grayer. He regretted bringing Jasper into the forces for training. If he had allowed Jasper to lead a normal life, Jasper would be managing a company worth billions and becoming an influential man. Unfortunately, Antoine had brought him into an organization like the Special Forces, forcing Jasper to adapt to a life of danger and uncertainty. On the other hand, Antoine wished for the Wyatt family's lineage to continue, but Jasper's profession ensured he could never lead a normal life. Even if he were to leave the military, the scars of his experiences would haunt him, preventing him from ever living like an ordinary person. At that moment, a doctor exited the operation theater and looked at Antoine. "Mr. Wyatt, may I have a moment of your time?" "No need for that. Just tell me." Antoine desperately wanted to know Jasper's condition. Judging by the initial test, the patient seems to have escaped any significant organ damage, which is positive news. However, there's a serious concern about his hearing. Antoine found it difficult to accept and asked, "Does that mean he's lost his hearing completely?" "We won't know for sure until he wakes up. Right now, he needs rest. We'll also assess his brain and memory when he regains consciousness." Antoine felt relieved that Jasper had survived, but couldn't shake his worries. As a member of the ex-Special Forces, having a keen hearing was essential to participate in missions. If Jasper lost his hearing, it could jeopardize his career. Hence, Antoine was determined to restore Jasper's hearing, no matter what. As for Jasper's memory, Antoine could only sigh helplessly. Jasper was his best agent and had never made a mistake on any mission. Antoine knew Jasper's emotions affected his judgment during the last mission. Just then, Antoine's phone rang, and he answered. "Hello. Mr. Wyatt. It's Jared Presgrave. I wanted to ask." "Mr. Presgrave, I assume your sister is awake. There's no need for further discussion on this matter. Please cooperate with me." On the other end, Jared reluctantly gave in upon hearing Antoine's firm response. "Understood. I apologize for troubling you." Antoine knew he was acting selfishly, but he had his reasons. The following morning, Elliot and Anastasia hurried to the hospital from the airport. Their hearts sank when they saw how fragile Willow appeared, even though they had only been apart for a few days. "Mom," Willow cried when she saw her mother, who ran over to hug her in tears. On the other hand, Elliot went out to talk with Jared. After hearing Antoine's wishes, he sighed. He felt guilty as their family matter had nearly cost Jasper his life. Hence, they decided not to pressure Antoine, no matter how much Willow cared for Jasper. "Dad, let's plan a vacation for Willow once she's feeling better." "Sure. We'll go as a family," Elliot agreed. During his time abroad, he had resolved a matter involving someone funding a war against their family. That person was no longer a threat. "Dad, is that matter taken care of?" Jared asked. "Yes. Elliot nodded, and only they knew about the grim details. Elliot clenched his fist as he watched Willow and Anastasia through the window. He felt helpless as he couldn't do anything about his daughter's relationship. Is Antoine really against Willow having any contact with Jasper? I spoke to him. He's steadfast in his decision. He doesn't want Willow involved with Jasper anymore. Willow will find someone who loves her in the future, Elliot said. He only wanted his daughter to be happy. Right now, Willow believes Jasper is gone. We just need to handle this carefully, and she'll eventually recover from the trauma, Jared said, his gaze fixed on Willow with a heavy heart. Inside the ward, Anastasia comforted Willow, her own eyes red from shedding tears. She wiped her daughter's tears and assured her, "Willow, I'll always be by your side." Willow sobbed in her mother's arms, but gradually calmed down, like a newborn baby settling into sleep. However, her heart felt as if it had been repeatedly stabbed, shattering into pieces. She couldn't fathom that Jasper was no longer in this world. How could she accept it when he had been with her just the night before, calling her name and sharing his smile? Yet, at that moment, he was gone. Afterward, Willow didn't want to undergo more hospital examinations and desperately wanted to leave. Her parents swiftly brought her home. Back in her room, she carefully gathered every item Jasper had touched, refusing to let anyone take them away. Willow took out one of his shirts from the closet, held it in her arms, and cried uncontrollably. Elliot and Anastasia waited in the living room outside for a long time, but their daughter did not come out. Ellen also wanted to be with her, but Willow locked herself in her room. She was in so much pain that she could not control herself. In this very room, all the memories she had shared with Jasper surrounded her. It was as if she could turn around and see him sitting on the couch, working diligently, or she could close her eyes and feel his breath beside her. When she opened her eyes, she could see his deep gaze locked onto her. However, all that remained now was the cold air, and this feeling was driving her crazy. Her tears flowed incessantly, and her heart was bleeding. This sense of despair and helplessness enveloped her tightly. At the military hospital, Jasper had just regained consciousness. Antoine had been by his side all along and had just wanted to close his eyes for a while when he heard a shuffling. He opened his eyes and saw Jasper conscious. "Jasper, you're awake," Antoine exclaimed as his eyes turned red. Jasper spoke hoarsely, "I can't hear, Uncle." Antoine immediately typed on his phone. "Don't worry, it's temporary. You'll recover. Is Willow okay?" Jasper's voice was extremely hoarse. Antoine nodded. "She's fine and doing well. You did an excellent job on this mission." Jasper closed his eyes, and the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. It seemed as though he did not care about his hearing loss and injuries. All that mattered was that Willow was safe. Antoine looked at him and felt a pang in his heart. This foolish nephew of his had indeed fallen deeply in love. Did Jasper not care about his well-being? It was heartbreaking for his family to see him like this. However, there was one thing Antoine was grateful for: Jasper had not lost his memory, and his brain seemed to be intact, except for the hearing loss. He typed on his phone and showed it to him. "Rest well, and don't overthink." Jasper nodded. At that moment, the world had become incredibly quiet, almost as if there were no sounds at all. After being pulled down by Calvin, Jasper did not fall into the sea along with him. Instead, he grabbed onto a rock halfway down, and when the explosion occurred, he lay flat on the rock and blocked the tremendous impact. As a result, the blast shattered the rock he clung to, and he fell into the sea. Had he not grabbed that rock and fallen into the sea with Calvin, he would have disappeared from this world. Antoine wrote many words on the phone and finally handed it to Jasper, who took over the phone and read them. Then, he looked up at his uncle. He made a serious gesture of refusing to negotiate with Jasper and indicated that the words he had typed on the phone were his orders. Jasper said hoarsely. The Presgraves are on board, too? Antoine nodded. Jasper suddenly shot up in a panic. How will Willow bear this? Antoine gently pushed him back down, then picked up the phone and wrote, "You will have no contact with the Presgraves from now on. They will handle it." After Jasper read it, he closed his eyes, but the pain was still evident on his forehead. He could not imagine how much pain Willow would feel when she received this news. He could refrain from contacting or disappearing from her life, but he did not want to bring her a life of pain. Antoine typed another sentence. "I will arrange for you to take a vacation and receive treatment. During this time, you must forget about her." After Jasper read it, he turned his face away. Antoine knew his decision was hard for his nephew to accept, but he had to do it. Soon, Sirius also arrived. "Persuade him, will you?" Antoine told him. He nodded and sat beside Jasper, relieved that everything seemed okay. Jasper had taken on all the dangers in this mission and saved his life. Sirius sensed that Jasper did not want to talk. Given his current condition, he could not communicate either. Hence, Sirius could only stay by his side and lend a hand when needed. Though the patient had just woken up, he fell asleep again due to mental exhaustion. 3 days had passed in the blink of an eye. Willow had cried so much that her eyes were inflamed, and Anastasia had to call a doctor to the house to examine her. Her beautiful big eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. The entire Presgrave family was heartbroken, but they felt helpless. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Jasper was able to get out of bed and move around. Most of his time was spent sitting in the garden, and no one knew what he was thinking. Antoine had assigned men to keep an eye on him. During that time, he could not wander around freely, and Antoine had also confiscated his phones and laptops, not allowed to use any devices because they could affect his emotions. Especially now that Jasper could not contact Willow. He was certainly thinking about her, reminiscing many of their memories together. He had never known that once he left her, he would miss her so badly that he felt his love for her grew. It was as if she was the light of his life, and without her, his heart returned to darkness. He did not know the direction of his future or the meaning of his life. The 5th day arrived. Willow was about to head to Jasper's villa, having a premonition that he had not died. Everyone must have deceived me. There's no way he could have died so easily. She also wondered whether her father and brother had received incorrect information or if the organization had deliberately spread fake news that Jasper had passed away. He was so powerful and was the strongest man she had ever seen. No, he could not have left so abruptly. These days, she had been comforting herself with these thoughts: he was alive, and it was misinformation. He should still be in the world, lying in some hospital. He has to be around still. Given the situation, Jared had sent 8 bodyguards to escort her since she did not need her family to accompany her. She knew the access code and entered without allowing the bodyguards to follow. She walked through the place alone, and the flowers and plants seemed to have withered even more. Then, she arrived at Jasper's room, which had gathered some dust. That sight wrenched her heart as she sat on the couch, unable to hide her grief. "You're alive. I believe you'll come back to me, Jasper. If you're still here, please come back to me." Willow spoke to the air, took a piece of paper from her bag, and placed it on the table. She knew that if Jasper were to return someday, he would see it. In the hospital, Jasper looked at the 2 guards standing not far away. They were sent by his uncle, and he urgently needed to know about Willow's situation. However, Antoine had been preventing him from doing so. The feeling of longing grew stronger. If he did not receive news about Willow, he knew he would go crazy. He could refrain from appearing before her, but he had to know her condition. He wanted to hear if she was doing well, if she was sick, or if she was eating properly. If she was fine, he would be prepared to withdraw from her life and would not disturb her anymore. He just needed to know these things for now. In actuality, it would be easy if Jasper wanted to lose the two guards. 2 minutes later, he walked out of the lobby wearing a doctor's uniform and a mask. He shattered a car's window and quickly left the hospital. The entire area was under surveillance, but he did not hide. Instead, he headed straight for his nearby residence. When Antoine received the report from his subordinates, he saw a photo of Jasper leaving. He could not help but sigh. His nephew had slipped away once again. Quickly, he picked up his phone and left. By then, Jasper had returned to his home. He took a laptop and tried to log in, only to find that his account had been locked. That was a piece of cake for Jasper, who immediately hacked into someone else's account and used it to log into the satellite system. Soon, he began looking through the surveillance footage. He did not see any traces of Willow in Presgrave residence, so he immediately checked the surveillance in his villa. He merely wanted to know if she had been there, but when he checked his room, he was stunned. She was sitting on the couch in his room, her countenance much paler than usual. Although the footage was blurry, he could see that her eyes had turned red and swollen. She wiped her tears from time to time, looking like a beautiful yet lifeless puppet for a long while. Jasper's breaths quickened, his heart aching so much that he could not catch his breath. He quietly gazed at the girl through the lenses, heartbroken. However, at that moment, Willow's phone rang. She hastily wiped her tears and adjusted her expression before answering the call. "Hello, Mom? I'll be right back. I'm fine. I just went out for a walk." She knew Anastasia had not eaten or slept for her sake in the past few days. Her mother had gotten much frilier, so she knew better than to make her worry even more. Although suffering in her heart, she tried to look happy before her family members. She could not let them suffer with her just because she was in pain, could she? "All right, Mom. I'll be back soon. Don't worry about me." Willow pursed her lips and forced a smile. After hanging up, she picked up her bag and looked longingly at her surroundings, finally departing. Gazing at her figure, Jasper knew she had survived the worst period of her life. At least she listens to her family now. Just then, someone unlocked the room to his door before Antoine rushed in. When he saw his nephew on the couch, he said in exasperation, "Can't you just talk to me about it?" With that, he sighed again. He knew Jasper could not hear what he was saying, so he took out his phone and typed some words. "You can rest at home, but promise me that you won't come into contact with anyone from the Presgrave family." Jasper was just done checking up on Willow and nodded at his uncle. "Okay, I promise I'll give myself time. I booked an appointment with a specialist, so you'll get your ears checked tomorrow. Rest well, and don't overthink it." Antoine patted him. Jasper nodded. He could not meet Willow like this, anyway. He was not the perfect version of himself right now, and if he lost his hearing, he would have to live a brand new way. Perhaps he would not have to go on missions anymore, but that also meant he would become more redundant. "I won't even be able to protect her or hear her voice." For the longest time, he believed he was out of Willow's league. Now, he started to feel inferior again. Perhaps Antoine's decision was right. Jasper should not be with Willow anymore because he might prevent her from leading a better life. She was the young lady of the Presgrave family who would fulfill all her desires. Her life would be wonderful even in the future. At that moment, Jasper was feeling a little down, and Antoine could see that as well. Picking up his phone, he typed out some words. "Trust me. I'll make sure you recover." Jasper did not want his uncle to be worried about him either. After all, Antoine had a more pivotal mission awaiting him. He nodded, signaling his trust to his uncle. In truth, Antoine could not take better care of Jasper. He was shouldering the burdens of the country. Just then, his phone rang. He glanced at it and then left. Jasper returned to his laptop and switched the screens. Cars from the Presgrave family were shown on the monitor, escorting Willow home. Although he could only see her through the screen, it was enough to comfort his heart. At least she's in one piece. When Willow arrived home, tears remained on her face, after which she took a tissue and dried her tears. Then, she forced a smile so she could talk peacefully to her family.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.